I know what you were thinking. This doesn't look like Lost Ark at all. No, if you would just go for the camera perspective, then of course this is not Lost Ark. But that's not really what I'm comparing it to. I'm comparing it to Lost Ark because of the gameplay elements and that they are actually trying to do something differently this time when it comes to MMORPGs. Because let's be honest here, when you are starting an MMORPG nowadays, you kinda already know what to expect, right? You are creating a character, you have your standard classes, and then you are leveling up your character till endgame through quests and some dungeons. Then you are doing the raids and maybe some PvP here and there, and that's basically the experience you get. And that's the point with Lost Ark. Lost Ark actually tried to still have all the things I just mentioned, right? It's not like they are going away, but they try to add a lot of other things you can do in the game. They try to give you variety, which is not just about powering up your character. Now, have they really succeeded with that? That is a very different topic. But that's not really what this is about. This video is about Chrono Odessey, which you are seeing here in the background, and which is also going into global beta in June. And if you're interested, you can just go on the official Steam page and request access for said beta. When the beta starts and if they are letting in everyone who requests access, I do not know, but hey, at least request the access, right? So, what is this game? Well, this game is published and I think also developed by Kakao Games, and well, it is developed by Chrono Studio, but I think they are part of Kakao Games if I'm not completely wrong. Please correct me down below in the comments if that is not the case, but that's what I found out so far. And the game is an MMORPG. That means, yes, you're creating your character, you're leveling up your character, and then there will be endgame activities. But there is actually quite a bit of different gameplay elements they are trying to integrate here. And the first big thing you probably already guessed when you were reading the name is that you can turn back time. So they say that they have been heavily inspired by another game called Chrono Trigger, and they wanted to bring some of that ideas into the MMORPG genre. That means that you can basically shift forward or shift backwards in time. That goes for the environment, as they also want to utilize that for certain combat moments. Now, we have to see how this really works. I've only briefly shown us a few elements here and there, and it was really just like, oh yeah, you can turn back the time for a second or two, or you can, like, when it comes to lore parts, you can restore like some like lore areas so you know more about the world, what happened here. It reminded me a little bit of Last Epoch, and the problem with Last Epoch, which is an action RPG, is that it's gimmicky there. Like, it sounds like it's a very, very important thing, but from a purely gameplay perspective, it's completely a gimmick and not really anything anyone bothers really with. And I'm hoping that Chrono Odyssey can make it important. They can make it something meaningful, and that is a tough thing to do, right? Like, actually putting in like time traveling in just games is already a tough thing to do, but in an MMORPG, that's really tough. So I'm still curious about it, and I have to see it in action to really decide if it's meaningful or not. But the idea definitely sounds interesting, right? Another huge part I am really curious about is the group content. So they made it very clear that they want to design a game which is also doable for solo players, and there will be tons and tons of sometimes very difficult solo activities. But they also talked about group content. And let's be real here, group content in MMORPGs is kind of difficult, especially for an aging community, right? You have responsibilities, you have your family, you have other things you want to play. So getting like 40 people together or even 20 people to do like certain raids or certain group activities is really tough. Like it's most of the time the toughest thing, and it's sometimes even harder than the actual content you were trying to finish together. So what they are trying to do is something interesting, that they are saying, okay, small group content is 3 people. Yes, 3, you and 2 other people, which, let's be honest here, that's really doable. And if not, I'm pretty sure there will be some tools in the game which will allow you to do that quickly. And even the end game content, the max size of groups will be 5. That's normally the size in a lot of MMORPGs for standard group content. This is the end game content. Now, they made it very clear that there will be like some world bosses where you definitely need more than 5 people, but it's more like, okay, you have 5 people in your group, and then there will be more and more people coming in, like other groups which are unassociated with you. And then, of course, the end game content itself is designed around this 5 groups or 3 people or solo. Like they want to make sure that they are offering enough content there for all the 3 group sizes. And I think that's a very smart idea, because there is another problem. It seems like a lot of MMOs are sometimes don't really want to think about, because it's a bad thing, and that is people stop playing. Right? The player numbers will go down over time. That's a fact. That there are not a lot of games out there who can say that they kept their huge player margins or even increased over time, right? You can count those games on one hand, right? So that they are actually thinking about that and say, okay, well, what happens when it gets harder to get those 40, 20 people together, or even like those 10 people? Then we have like a bunch of people who cannot really do the end content anymore, or they had to cut down on like other players, yada, yada, yada. Like there are so many things which just come with games are shrinking over time, that again, like a lot of developers don't want to think about that, because their game will be different, their game will be successful, and they will have all the billions of players worldwide. And you already know, no, come on, reality is looking different. And Chrono Odyssey is already keeping that in mind with the player size and with the different activities they are offering. And I think that's a very, very smart thing to do. But also, let's talk a little bit about endgame content. There will be dungeons and raids, like as I already mentioned. There will also be a PvE, PvP content, so an open area where you can do a lot of PvE, and then you can also just create groups with random people you will see. And that slowly transforms into, you will find other groups who also came together, and then you can also fight them in PvP. So it's a bit of an extraction shooter where you can start alone, and then you can make friends or enemies along the way, which I'm also very curious to see how that goes. But there is something else here. And this is like the first non-fighting activity we have to talk about. Because, yes, there will be crafting in the game, there will be harvesting, and there is quite a lot to it. They have already announced that, yes, you could completely level from the beginning till the end game by just doing crafting. It will be completely possible, and it is, from what we have heard at least, it seems to be as fast as just doing the normal content, right? So if you love to do crafting, it seems like this game is offering you that path without you having to do any fighting. And even crazier, they also already said that yes, crafters will be able to craft the best gear in the game, which you normally would find in raid dungeons or through other means, right? So you can just also craft them. How that exactly works, they haven't told us yet in detail, but they said, yes, you can have the same gear as the hardcore raiders. Of course, you will have to put in a lot of work into the farming and crafting activities we haven't seen yet. So we have to see how that works. But just the idea to have like activities which have nothing to do with like the usual find a group, fight this dungeon boss, and actually do something different, and then maybe even get the same rewards, that is cool. I really like that idea. This is why I loved Lost Ark. Yes, sure, you couldn't really get the same gear as the Raiders and all that, but there was at least a lot of activities which didn't necessarily had to do with just, okay, how do I get my gear score up? How do I be ready for the raid? And it's just fun, and you could still spend your time in it. And I'm hoping that Chrono Odyssey is offering something similar, and at least there are hints of that here. The only thing I didn't like too much, they have also announced, is the whole weapon swap thing they are doing, like Throne and Liberty, where you basically have two classes slash two weapon slots, and then you can combine them to create your own class. It's a weird new thing, and I personally was never a big fan of it. But yeah, I'm old, so please forgive me. With that said, I would definitely cover Chrono Odyssey more in the future. I'm really curious to see more about this game, and it already sounds really good. I know a lot has to be discovered, especially later on. It's very important to figure out what the monetization will be in detail, because let's be real here, we have seen a lot of games where that is sometimes a problem. So we have to see about that. But it already looks pretty cool, and I cannot wait to see more of the game and keep you covered. With that said, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel if you want to get more. With that said, have a good one, stay safe, bye bye.